what do you wanna get, really wanna get in Molten Core? The question I get most of the time, because a lot of people do soft reserve, is what should I soft reserve? What should I not soft reserve? And this is gonna be the video for that, I guess. I hope this will help you. So if I were to add it up, because I opened every single tab, we got 13, 14, 15, 16 potential items you can get out of Molten Core and Onyxia. Onyxia is almost not worth doing as a warrior. As a matter of fact, I reserved the bag as a troll because I think it's hilarious. I got one of the bags already. But what should you aim for? First of all, we got the gun and the bow. There is two different ranged items in Molten Core. There is the gun from Golemag. It gives you crit and it is kinda fast. So it is not a hunter weapon. It is too fast for a hunter. And it also has some stamina on it. Now, this is traditionally like the tank weapon, but if you get a weapon racial in Molten Core because you got the dagger item or whatever, you probably are over the hit cap by now. And if that's the case, you probably want this as a DPS anyway. The option, however, is also really cool, and that is Striker's Mark. Striker's Mark is 22 attack power and 1% hit. And now, compared to Black Crow is the pre-raid vesting slot one you get in LVRS. You can also get like the same bow, I think, in Dagger Maul, whatever, the satyr bow thingy. This one is also too fast for a hunter, so there is no problem in wanting this bow for you. But as you can see, this one, the Striker's Mark, is way more dense in the value that you get out of the item. You get 22 attack power, which is effectively 11 strength, and you get 1% hit, compared to this one where you only get 6 stamina. 6 stamina is not a lot, even like compared to the strength, right? Even if you consider stamina as valuable as strength. 22 attack power is 11, and 6 stamina is, well, half of that. So 1% crit and 6 stamina versus Striker's Mark. That basically means you always want to take Striker's Mark. You can make an argument that Black Crow from LBRS is better than the Blaster Shot Launcher, so we are not gonna go for this almost ever. Probably wanna leave it to the tank, maybe. That's gonna be one of them. And now we got Dire Maul out, so it is not a big deal anymore, but early on in the tier before Dire Maul, there was a lot of people that were reserving this item because they didn't want to farm Black Crow. It got a lot easier with Dire Maul now, but it's the same item, so yeah, you can go for this. This is the one you go for anyway. It is a tiny bit better than Black Crow. It is not a lot better than Black Crow, and that's another thing. We are comparing 3 agility to 22 attack power, so it's a difference of 7 strength or so. Not a huge game-changing item. I would never go for Striker's Mark first, but it will eventually be an item I need. Next item everybody is gonna need is gonna be the Onyxia Tooth Pendant. It is 1% crit, 1% hit, 12 agility and 10 fire resistance necklace. This necklace is amazing. It is not even that much worse than the next second best that you get later on in the game. So the Onyxia Tooth Pendant, everybody's gonna need it. It is a crit and a half, basically. 12 agility is like more than half a crit and 1% hit. It is so astronomically better than pre-raid best in slot necklace you can get, which is like 1% crit, the Mark of Ordering, whatever. This is so much better. So if you do Onyxia and you're a DPS or a tank warrior, okay, never take the tanking one. That's a waste of time. Take this one every time. This is so much better. So yeah, like most warriors are gonna soft reserve the head. This is the Onyxia head quest right here, this one. So you absolutely gotta reserve the head for this. There is, however, 2 other items from Onyxia. This, if you're the Horde, is gonna be one of the hardest items to get because the competition is so fierce for it, and that's Deathbringer. If you are an orc, you got the axe racial, of course, and basically the problem with Deathbringer, the problem with axes, is that there is not good one-handed axes. I think this is actually the only DPS one-handed axe in the game from a raid, of course, from like raid content. This is the only good weapon for orcs, warriors that you can get in a raid, aside from two-handers. We're gonna talk about two-handers a little later. If you are an orc and you're DPSing, you got no choice. You gotta go for Deathbringer. It is also like a really good weapon. If you got the Edge Masters, go right ahead. This weapon is amazing. Like the speed is very slow, which is something you want, and 656 damage is insane. So Deathbringer is an amazing axe, and if you are in the Horde, you are never gonna get it because every orc warrior wants it. So yeah, you got that. if you're Alliance or like if you're not an orc, whatever, you can also go for Beastcag. Now, Beastcag is a little faster, but it is also an amazing sword. It also does a bunch of damage, one less DPS for some reason, but it works very well as a main hander. Beastcag is an amazing one-hander, and if you're Alliance, it's the opposite. Like every human is gonna want Beastcag, even though, unlike the Axes, there are some swords that you can get somewhere else. So it is not gonna be as competitive. Deathbringer, almost impossible to get because of the competition. Beastcag, a lot more likely. If you do not need a main hander weapon, however, that's pretty much all Onyxia has to offer. The head, the bag, Deathbringer or Beastcag, and that's pretty much it. So I would say like number one priority is getting the main weapon, whatever you are. If you are a human, you go for Beastcag. If you are an orc, you go for Deathbringer. After that, everybody wants the Onyxia head. And after that, there is a bag. This website is so freaking slow. I am using WoW Classic TV instead of WoW Head because when you click on a bunch of like vanilla normal items, for whatever reason it says Soul Phase 4 on them, and it pisses me off because they are not soul items, but it says Soul Phase 4 anyway. It pisses me off so much. Anyway, this is like the filler item, the bonus item, the bag. There is an 18 slaughter bag, which are the best bags in the game. So even if you got all the gear from Onyxia, you still gotta get this. I am such a memer that like we got like what 22 warriors in Onyxia, I think. Like, I am not getting that stupid head. And I am a 200 warrior and there is no 200s in Onyxia, so I reserve the bag. I am a jerk, okay? I piss Dwarf Lord so much when I reserve the bag, but it's so worth it. Is 1% more crit gonna change my life? No, this backpack is gonna change my life. A bag is 30 gold, man. So yeah, you can also reserve this. You can get 4 of these. They are not unique. You can have all 4 Onyxia bags. That's freaking awesome. I love that there is something else to get out of a raid that isn't gear, so you can keep coming and helping your guild get it cleared even after you get all the gear. I want to see a lot more of these things. Sadly, that's not the case of any vanilla. Very well, but continuing with Molten Core, there are some options for weapons in Molten Core, and that's what I wanted to say when I told you that there is a good alternative for Beastcag. That is the Brutality Blade, 250 weapon speed, which is, I think, the same as Beastcag. Is a little too fast, like not too fast. It is a little on the faster end of a good one-hander. The slower the better, but it's still a very good weapon. 51 DPS, 1% crit and 9 agility on it and 9 strength. It is not as good as Beastcag's. Beastcag's is better, but this weapon is still awesome. So if you got this, you can consider yourself best in slot. You're pretty much done. When it comes to tanking, the best weapon for tanking is probably gonna be the Core Hound Tooth. Not necessarily because it is the best weapon for a tank, but because it is almost as good and it will not compete with rogues, because dagger rogues are a thing, right? But this weapon is 160, which is super fast. You want a weapon to be super fast, and it will also work as an amazing offhander later on, because you can use it either main hand or offhand. So if you're tanking with a shield, you can use it as a main hand, and if you're doing like the DPS Fury Prod rotation, you can get like actual dual wield, and this is gonna be your offhand. Very versatile as a dagger, 1% crit, 20 attack power, really good damage. However, if we're going for straight the best, that is not gonna be the Core Hound Tooth, that is gonna be Perdition Blade. This is the best in slot dagger main hand for dagger rogues. Every rogue is gonna want this dagger, and that's the problem. 58 freaking DPS, which for tier 1 is absolute insanity. This dagger hits super hard. So yeah, in theory, if you can get it, it is gonna be the best tanking weapon for you, but it is not gonna be that much different than Core Hound Tooth. I think you're kinda griefing if you take Perdition from a rogue. That's just my opinion. You can do it if you're in a pog, right ahead, bro. Everybody's game. As a matter of fact, if you're like a warrior without a weapon racial, and you take like the Mogger's Belt, and you take this as your main hand, it is probably best in slot even for DPS if you don't have a weapon racial. Should you do it? Should you take Perdition Blade from a rogue? I am not gonna tell on anybody. I am not a cop. I am not a snitch. And sadly, there is not any other one-hander weapon. Molten Core is extremely poor on one-hander weapons, and that freaking sucks. But I figured I would talk about the two-handers, because two-hander warrior is very much viable in tier 1. It is not as good, okay? It is not as good, but it is a very much respectable spec, and they will probably do more damage than any other class in the game, even if they do not do as the same damage as a dual wield Fury warrior. I made a guide on two-hander Furies, you can check it out. There are 3 options. There is 3 amazing two-handers in Molten Core that you can look at. First of all, you got BRE, Bone River's Edge. This is 340, which is like kinda like really fast for a two-hander warrior, but 75 freaking DPS will compensate for that. 75 DPS is absolute insanity. Sulfuras I think has 80, of course you also got Sulfuras. And don't get me wrong, if you can get your hands on it, it is probably gonna be best in slot for you as a warrior. It is just not worth it. But yeah, if you can get your hands on it, if you wanna spend the money for no reason, you definitely are gonna get good mileage out of this. It is better in the hands of, I don't know, like an enhancement shaman or a red paladin, haha, if they really wanna get it, but you can definitely appreciate it. It swings for 220, dude. Compare that to Bone River's Edge, 206. So yeah, Bone River's Edge does a lot of freaking damage. It has 1% crit on top of that, and it ignores armor, okay? That's what makes this weapon so good for PvE in particular, even though of course in PvP still slaps. If you get a proc, you ignore 700 of the enemy's armor, and you can get it up to 3 times. If you can ignore not even like 3 procs, not even 2100, if you can ignore 1400 armor of like Ragnaros for a couple seconds, that is a lot of freaking damage. And that is also a lot more rage. So this weapon is absolutely bonkers. Because like if you get all the debuffs on a boss, the way it works is that the lower armor and mob is, the more damage protection they lose by every other point of armor. Because it's like exponential, so when you go exponential on the way down, also goes down very fast. It's weird. It's weird. It's like a curve like this, the armor. Alright, is the camera mirrored? Well, you know what I mean. You know what I mean. Like armor is like a weird mathematical thing. And if you can lower armor a little bit more after you put all the debuffs on the boss, it is a lot of freaking damage. And BRE is gonna absolutely slap. Here's the problem. This will only be very good on humans, because you cannot get a weapon racial for swords. Two-hander swords, you can get weapon racial for one-handers. And that's gonna be the problem. There is also an axe equivalent, and that's gonna be the Spinal Reaper with 74 DPS, pretty much the same DPS, and also a speed of 340, which is kinda fast. The proc is essentially useless. It will give you 20 res when you kill a mob. If you're fighting a boss, that will not happen, so you can write that off. So you only wanna get a Spinal Reaper if you are an orc. If you are not an orc, BRE is way better, but Spinal Reaper is freaking awesome. And that doesn't mean that's it though, because we also got the weapon I actually soft reserve myself. Why do I not reserve BRE? I am a torrent warrior. Because everybody wants it. That's it. So I go for Obsidian Edge Blade. Now Obsidian Edge Blade is a whopping 10 less DPS, which is crazy, but it gives you 42 strength. 42 strength is a lot more valuable than 1% hit, crit, or 34 attack power. Will it be as good as having 10 more DPS on your weapon? No. 42 strength is actually 6 more DPS on the weapon. So you can imagine this as doing 71 DPS, kinda. But what makes this sword so damn good, even if it is not quite best in slot, is that it gives you a weapon racial. 8 to 200 swords. Now, this is completely huge, because if you got 8 weapon skill, glancing blows only give you a 5% penalty. When you got weapon skill, you reduce the chance for a glancing blow from 40% to 30%. I think from 5 to 8, it is the same chance basically, but it is effectively like 30% or so. If you got 10% less chance to get a glancing blows cannot crit, so you gain a crit cap of more 10% of more crit. That is freaking huge, obviously. That's like one of the reasons that weapon skill is so broken in vanilla. You also change the penalty from 35% less damage when you do a glancing blow to only 5%. That means for a non-weapon skill user, you're gonna lose 14% of your damage from glancing blows, because 40% of the time you get a glancing blow and you lose 35% of the damage every time, right? 14% of the total damage and almost exactly 14% of the regeneration is gone. And that sucks. So not only you lose crit cap, you also get this problem. However, if you get 8 weapon skill, this goes down all the way to 30%, and this goes down to only 5.9, I think. Let's see, 5.12, okay. All of a sudden, glancing blows only lose you 1.5% of the damage. They are almost insignificant. They still mess with your crit cap, and that sucks, but they are almost insignificant loss of damage now. So you can imagine the 8 weapon skill right here as you do 14% more damage on your white auto attacks. That's big. That is not nothing. And your white auto attacks are all your regeneration, so that's why it matters so much. Not necessarily because of the damage, which is like 40% of your damage is auto attacks and 13% of that damage is increased, okay. It is significant still, but yes, people sleep on the Obsidian Edge Blade a lot, and they shouldn't, because it's freaking awesome. And that's why I want it. And if you do not have a weapon racial and you don't want to swipe, okay, because you could get Edge Masters and dual wield, but I am not gonna do that, so this is what you should get, yes. It will also help you in PvP, because when you're doing PvP, you need a two-hander for that, so that's also a cool thing. Now, there are also some items that everybody wants. You got the Risk Guard So Stability. They are, I think, best in slot. They are not that much better than the pre-raid best in slot items, but they are technically better. I would probably not prioritize this. You got the Flame Guard Gauntlets with art 1% crit and 54 attack power. These are definitely really good. The problem is you got Boons, 2% hit, you know, if you did that quest. Or you got Edge Masters, which is 7 weapon skill. Or you got Devil Sword. So if you got those, you are probably not going to be using this. But if you don't, they are absolutely amazing, so you should get them. If you got a weapon racial, I would keep an eye on this one. Then you also got the Onslaught Girdle. Now, this is probably the item that most people should soft reserve first. It is very rare. It only drops from Ragnaros, and wow, this website is super broken. You cannot use Wowhead and you cannot use Classic DB anymore. This sucks. Okay, 12% chance of Ragnaros. So it is very rare and it only drops once in the raid. 1% hit and 1% crit and 31 freaking strength. This thing is a truck. This thing is best in slot almost the entirety of vanilla. So absolutely every single warrior is gonna want this, and it is gonna be the most competitive item in the game. So what are your chances you get it if it drops? Very low. And that's the thing you gotta realize from soft reserve. A soft reserve is like the one item, that thing that people tell me the most about. You kinda are unincentivized to soft reserve a rare item unless that's the last thing you need. Because your soft reserve is much better used in getting like a kinda less rare item that also you need, even if you don't need it as much. Of course, I would get the weapon first. Every time I would start with the weapon. But Onslaught will be like the number one item. Like out of Molten Core, the one item that you really want to come out with is the Onslaught Girdle. This thing is super overtuned. Then you also got 2 rings that everybody is also gonna want. You got a Quick Strike, which is 1% crit, 30 attack power and 5 strength. It is a really nice stat stick. You also got the Band of Akuria, which is 2% hit and 16 agility. The thing is, in Alterac Valley, you're gonna get Don Julius. Don Julius is 1% crit and 1% hit and 16 attack power. Don Julius should be better than pretty much all the others. By the raw amount of stats, Quick Strike is a little better than Band of Akuria, and the problem with 2% hit items by the time you're in Molten Core is you either like took daggers, or you got like your Edge Masters, or you got like even an Obi Blade, but like most people got a weapon racial at this point, somehow. I would only like chase a Band of Akuria if I don't have it. 6% hit is deceptively easy to go over, and that's no good. So the Band of Akuria is nice and all, but I would go for Quick Strike. That's like the one I would soft reserve. Because once again, Don Julius. If you really want another hit ring, you can get Don Julius and it is awesome. You can also get the Blackstone ring, which is obviously not as good, but it will take you there. So hit is usually not a problem by the time you're farming Molten Core. And here's the problem with Molten Core. The might set freaking sucks. They are for tanking. All the items got like way too much stamina over like strength or whatever, and the set bonuses are all tanking related, so the set bonuses are pretty useless. The only decent ones are the gloves because they got 1% hit on them. That's pretty much the only decent one you can get, and it still is not even that good. Like 22 strength, 1% hit, it is good, but barely. So it will probably go to the tanks anyway. You probably want to get Flame Walker instead. And because there is no DPS set for Warrior in Molten Core, there is a lot of items that you are not gonna upgrade in Molten Core. You are not gonna get new pens, you're not gonna get new chest piece, you are not gonna get even new boots, you're gonna get new gloves, you are gonna get new braces, of course, and the belt. But that's pretty much it. It kinda sucks. You're not getting all the items out of Molten Core. That's not a problem for other classes. Rogues get their own set, which is really good. Hunters get their own set. Mages get their own set. But if you're a DPS warrior, you're screwed. A lot of items got no option for you in raids. You're gonna have to wait for Solgorov and BWL to get like better pens and whatnot. What is the item you're gonna soft reserve first? If I were to recommend to you, I would say you probably should soft reserve the weapon first. The weapon is the big one. But I am not a cop. You wanna get that Onslaught Girdle like day one? You know, you never know when it's gonna drop. Maybe you see it like once every month. Don't wanna waste the opportunity. You wanna soft reserve it? That's up to you, brother. I wouldn't bother with that. I want my sword. I want my sword really bad. Subscribe, join the Discord, and thank you for watching.